President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration moves here.
We are delivering mass deportation, and it's happening very fast.
The National Guard has arrived in Los Angeles,
where there's been a tense standoff in the city between protesters and security forces.
City and state leaders in Los Angeles have accused President Trump of deliberately provoking chaos.
In the dead of night, ICE agents in bulletproof vests stormed apartment buildings in cities like New York and Chicago.
The Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, went along as federal agents conducted an overnight roundup in the Bronx,
dragging people from their homes while terrified families watched from behind locked doors. When Donald Trump returned to presidency in 2025, one of his first major moves was to reignite his aggressive immigration enforcement agenda.
Trump administration says that it will pay illegal immigrants $1,000 to voluntarily leave the country.
This time, the focus was sharper, the tactics more forceful, and the message clear.
Today, I signed an executive order to launch the first ever self-deportation program for illegal aliens. We are making it as easy as possible for illegal aliens to leave America.
Undocumented immigrants were no longer safe, not even in cities that had long considered themselves sanctuaries.
It does appear that the administration of Donald Trump is determined to carry out its signature initiative, rounding up and deporting undocumented workers and migrants. And it appears that the administration doesn't particularly care whether the people here like it or not.
In late January, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, agents launched a series of coordinated raids across major US cities, including New York, Chicago, and Miami. These cities had previously limited cooperation with federal immigration authorities, but under Trump's directive, ICE was given broad authority to operate within their boundaries. The raids were often conducted in the early hours of the morning, with heavily armed agents executing warrants and detaining individuals suspected of immigration violations.
Earlier today, dozens of federal agents flanked by National Guard troops swarmed MacArthur Park. Mayor Bass and Governor Gavin Newsom denounced their actions as political theater intended to scare the community.
Over a dozen military vehicles, Humvees, agents on horseback flooded the park, but we still don't know if they actually detained anyone.
One of the most high-profile incidents occurred in the Bronx, where ICE agents arrested Anderson Zambrano-Pacheco, a 26-year-old Venezuelan national. Zambrano-Pacheco was identified as a fugitive wanted in connection with a home invasion in Aurora, Colorado, and was also charged with being a fugitive in possession of a firearm and ammunition. Neighbors described the raid as sudden and overwhelming, with agents swarming the apartment complex and creating a scene of chaos and fear.
New York City as a Venezuelan migrant that was at the center of that viral moment in Aurora, Colorado during the apartment takeover has been busted in the Big Apple.
The psychological impact of these raids on communities was profound. Families were left traumatized, with children witnessing the arrest of their parents or neighbors. Community members reported increased anxiety and a pervasive sense of insecurity, fearing that they or their loved ones could be next.
I mean, I was planning on calling ICE, to be honest with you, so they got here before I was able to call them.
I don't think it's right that they just, taking people out of the comfort zone and just trying to place them back where they came from.
The aggressive nature of the raids, coupled with the lack of transparency about who was being targeted, contributed to a climate of fear and uncertainty. In addition to the physical presence of ICE agents, the administration utilized various tactics to identify and detain undocumented immigrants.
Operations to arrest unauthorized immigrants across the U.S., mainly targeting sanctuary jurisdictions across the country.
This included the use of surveillance and data sharing agreements with local law enforcement agencies, allowing ICE to access information that could lead to arrests. The administration also expanded the use of expedited removal processes, enabling agents to deport individuals without a court hearing if they were apprehended within 100 miles of the border and had been in the US for less than 2 weeks. The Trump administration defended its aggressive immigration enforcement measures by framing them as necessary steps to protect American citizens and uphold the rule of law. Officials argued that the primary goal was to remove individuals who posed a threat to public safety, particularly those with criminal records or suspected gang affiliations. In public statements, the administration emphasized that the individuals targeted in the raids were not just undocumented immigrants, but also criminals who had committed serious offences. For example, ICE highlighted the arrest of Gregory Romero, a Dominican national in the country illegally who had been charged with multiple violent crimes, including sexual assault and assault with a dangerous weapon. By focusing on such cases, the administration sought to justify the broader crackdown as a means of removing dangerous individuals from communities. However, critics argued that the administration's approach was overly broad and lacked transparency. While officials claimed to prioritise the removal of violent offenders and gang members, many of those detained during the raids had no criminal records or were arrested for minor infractions. The lack of clear criteria for targeting individuals raised concerns about potential civil rights violations and the arbitrary nature of the enforcement actions.
The scene of the first major reckoning of President Trump's second term. 3 days of protests as people march against the government's policies on immigration. Increasingly violent scenes with both sides blaming the other. The White House accused protesters of using violent tactics.
Furthermore, the administration's use of expedited removal processes and the development of National Guard troops were seen by some as excessive and indicative of a punitive approach to immigration enforcement. The decision to bypass traditional legal proceedings in certain cases, such as invoking the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to deport individuals without court hearings, sparked legal and human rights concerns. These actions were criticised for undermining due process and eroding trust in the justice system.
A federal judge heard arguments Monday on whether the White House violated a court order by deporting migrants without proper court hearings. The Trump administration claims it has authority to do so under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
So now you've got armed ICE agents knocking down doors at dawn, families hiding in fear, and entire neighbourhoods too scared to even send their kids to school. But here's the thing, was this really about protecting Americans, or about sending a message? And if fear becomes the strategy, what does that say about the kind of country America is turning into? The administration also faced backlash for its rhetoric, which often painted undocumented immigrants as criminals and threats to national security. This narrative contributed to a climate of fear and suspicion, further marginalising immigrant communities and fueling anti-immigrant sentiment. Advocates argued that such language was not only misleading but also harmful, as it stigmatised entire populations based on the actions of a few individuals. The aggressive immigration enforcement actions undertaken by the Trump administration had a profound and chilling effect on immigrant communities across the United States. The fear generated by the raids and the uncertainty about who might be targeted next led many individuals and families to alter their daily routines and live in a state of constant anxiety. In cities like New York, Chicago, and Miami, residents reported being afraid to leave their homes, even for essential activities like work, school, or medical appointments.
Officers enforcing immigration laws will now be able to arrest migrants sheltering in schools and churches. The new guidance coming from the Trump administration today.
Parents kept their children home from school, and workers avoided their jobs.
Families say they're keeping their kids home from school out of fear that federal immigration agents could show up.
And this comes after President Trump rescinded a policy prohibiting ICE from making arrests at sensitive locations,
fearing that any public appearance could result in detention or deportation. This pervasive fear disrupted communities and strained social services as people became increasingly isolated and reluctant to seek help or report crimes. Community organisations and advocacy groups responded by mobilising to provide support and resources to those affected. Legal defence networks were established to offer representation and advice to individuals facing deportation proceedings. Emergency hotlines were set up to report ICE activity and provide real-time information to communities.
A new app called ICE Block allows users to report immigration and customs enforcement activity with just 2 taps on a smartphone. The app is completely anonymous and controversial, of course, but it is also gaining popularity across the country and right here in Los Angeles.
These efforts aim to empower individuals with knowledge of their rights and to create a sense of solidarity and resilience in the face of aggressive enforcement actions. Despite these efforts, the psychological toll on immigrant communities was significant. The constant threat of raids and the uncertainty about the future led to increased stress, anxiety, and depression amongst individuals and families. Children, in particular, were deeply affected, experiencing trauma from witnessing the detention of family members and living with the fear that their parents could be taken away at any moment.
Following this massive enforcement operation, many children are left without a mother or father, and they have nowhere to go.
The Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdown didn't just shake up things within the United States. It sent ripples across Latin America, straining diplomatic ties and sparking economic tensions. One of the most notable reactions came from Colombia, a long-standing US ally.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Late today, Colombia's president said that he would impose a 25% tariff on U.S. goods. He's also offering his presidential plane to bring back deported migrants.
In early 2025, President Trump ordered deportation flights to Colombia, using US military aircraft to return migrants.
Trump administration announced today that it has started to fly immigrants who entered the U.S. illegally out of the country using military planes.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro refused to allow these planes to land, citing concerns over the treatment of deportees and the lack of coordination with his government. In response, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods entering the US, threatening to increase it to 50% if Colombia didn't comply.
Colombia has turned back 2 US military flights that were carrying deported migrants. In response, Donald Trump has fumed that he'd impose emergency 25% tariffs on Colombian goods coming into the United States and would raise that to 50% in a week.
Petro retaliated with his own 25% tariff on US goods and announced plans to join the China-based New Development Bank, signaling a shift away from traditional US alliances.
President Petro is the first left-wing president in the recent history of Colombia, and the frequent exchanges between the two heads of state attach great importance to developing China-Colombia relations.
This standoff highlighted the broader regional disconnect with Trump's immigration policies. Latin American countries, many of which have citizens affected by US deportations, expressed frustration over the lack of consultation and the unilateral nature of the actions. The use of military aircraft for deportations and the imposition of tariffs were seen as heavy-handed tactics that undermine diplomatic norms.
2 Colombia Air Force planes have touched down in Bogota, carrying people who have been deported as part of Trump's immigration sweep.
Within the United States, Trump's immigration policies have deepened the political divide, with conservatives and liberals offering starkly different perspectives on the crackdown.
For 4 years, the American people have endured the effect of this calculated lawlessness. Schools flooded with non-English speaking students, hospitals packed with illegals demanding free health care, Americans pushed out of homeless shelters to make room for illegals.
Conservatives largely support the administration's actions, viewing them as necessary steps to uphold the rule of law and protect national security. They argue that strict enforcement deters illegal immigration and reduces crime, emphasizing the importance of sovereignty and the need to control the nation's borders. For many on the right, the use of military resources and the expansion of ICE operations are justified responses to what they see as a crisis at the border.
I'm not going to get used to it. I'm not going to get used to it because last I checked, I was elected to be mayor of the city. That did not include a federal takeover. So either you believe in democracy or you don't.
Liberals and Democrats, on the other hand, condemn the crackdown as inhumane and racially discriminatory. They point to reports of families being separated, individuals being deported without due process, and the targeting of specific communities.
It's about, belittle, the immigration communities, and it's about, we've been bullied.
Critics argue that the administration's policies are driven more by political motives than by genuine concerns about security, accusing Trump of using fear and xenophobia to galvanize his base.
But all of the things that we've given, and they wouldn't vote only because they hate Trump. But I hate them too, you know that?
The deployment of military aircraft for deportations and the imposition of tariffs on countries like Colombia are seen as examples of overreach and a disregard for human rights.
They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over, their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
This polarization is reflected in public opinion and legislative debates. While some Americans feel that the government is finally taking decisive action on immigration, others are alarmed by the erosion of civil liberties and the impact on immigrant communities. The divide has led to heated discussions in Congress, with lawmakers clashing over funding for immigration enforcement and the role of the military in domestic affairs. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.